Good afternoon and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, where we'll be talking about a video-first approach to customer reviews. Today's webinar is sponsored by Foursquare. I'm Danielle Moore, Senior Manager here with Adweek's Content Studio, and I'll be your host today. Before we get started, I do want to make sure everyone knows what to expect from today's event and is familiar with the features of our platform here. The actual presentation should go somewhere in the 30 to 35 minute range, after which we're going to have time for audience Q&A. So if at any point you have a question for one of our speakers, just use that Q&A tool right beneath the video window on your screen, and we're going to get to as many questions as we can after the end of the presentation. Also, it's definitely not too late to invite your colleagues to join us at today's webinar. About 15 minutes ago, you should have received a final reminder email from us, and in there you can find a link to the registration page that you can share with your colleagues. Still plenty of time for them to join us live today, but if they can't, please know that today's webinar is being recorded, and they can always catch that on-demand version. And in fact, that on-demand version will be available to all registrants. We'll email you a link to that later today when it's live around 3:30 Eastern or so. And if you would like a PDF of today's slides, you can find those in the event resources area right beneath the video window on your screen as well. As always, if you enjoyed today's webinar, be sure to check out our upcoming events at adweek.com/webinars, also linked below. And also in that event resources area, you can find links to Adweek's resource library and microlearning videos. New guides, white papers, and videos are all added regularly. So if you're looking for other ways to stay up to date, be sure to check all of that out. Now, let me introduce you to today's speakers. We're happy to be joined by Michael Ebel, CEO and co-founder at Atmosfy. Michael is the founder and CEO of Atmosfy, a video-first platform for discovering dining and nightlife in over 150 countries and 10,000 cities. His background includes working as a global project manager at Meta, a senior consultant at PwC, and a captain in the U.S. Air Force. Welcome, Michael. We're also pleased to welcome today's moderator, Barry Conklin, head of North America sales at Foursquare. Barry has extensive experience selling data and software products into technical personas across several major industries. Prior to Foursquare, he rose through the ranks into sales leadership at HackerOne. All right, we've got a lot of great content to dive into today, so let me bring Michael and Barry up on screen here to get us started. Welcome, Michael and Barry. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining in the audience. As Danielle mentioned, I'm Barry Conklin, head of North America sales here at Foursquare, and will be the moderator for today's discussion. Michael, pleasure to have you as well. Before we jump in, I'll allow you a moment to say hello and introduce yourself briefly if you'd like.
Great to be here. Founder, CEO of Atmosfy, and excited to be able to provide some insight into the platform.
Awesome. So today we are discussing exactly that. We're going to talk about your app, Atmosfy, and specifically how you're turning a network of local video reviews of restaurants and nightlife into a video-first discovery engine. And we'll talk about also kind of the role that location data from Foursquare plays in helping to elevate content and increase engagement. So some of the subjects we'll get into will be, specifically how do you leverage a recommendation engine to increase customer loyalty and trust in your brand, how you're using real-world data to create these really compelling digital journeys for your users. And then finally, tips and advice that you have as an expert and somebody who's been there for anybody on the call who's interested in building their own mobile apps or layering location awareness or personalization into their products. So we'll talk about that and a lot more. But before we get into the discussion, I'll take a brief step back and maybe just refresh the audience a little bit on Foursquare. So many of you probably know Foursquare as the check-in app, and we are really proud of those consumer app origins. In fact, Foursquare City Guide is still out there in the market doing very well. But over the last 14 years or so, we've undergone a pretty significant pivot and transformed into a leading geospatial and location intelligence platform. So we saw this opportunity for other companies to benefit from the unique technology that we developed to power our own apps. So now we're supporting companies across several verticals, from travel and hospitality, mobility, and social media, to provide that technology so they can build location awareness and personalization into their products and apps. Of course, one of those companies includes Atmosfy and Michael, who we have here. So with that, I think we can transition into learning a little bit more about Atmosfy. So Michael, I'll ask you the question if you could kick us off. What is Atmosfy and why did you build it?
Yeah. Thanks for that intro. Atmosfy is a video-first discovery platform across dining, nightlife, travel, and experiences, essentially making it easier to be able to discover experiences, whether they're in your city or whether you're traveling, a video-first journey that that really makes discovering like better places just effectively easier through short-form video.
That's great. And I know we'll talk a lot today about recommendation engines and things like that. So I'd love to dive into that in a little bit more detail on the recommendation engine side. But I know you also have a really interesting story and background on why you decided to build Atmosfy. I'm an Atmosfy user myself, and I know I've experienced it firsthand. Would love to hear you if you could expand on kind of what drove you to build Atmosfy and create the app in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So somewhere along the lines, kind of during my background in undergrad, I was a bartender for a few years, and it really stuck with me how punishing the local review landscape can be for local businesses. It can be a tough ecosystem. It's often downward biased, and people that are have a bad experience may be more likely to leave a review than people that have a good experience. And so really saw an opportunity to be able to sort of rebuild that. How would that look? What would that look like if you were going to rebuild that today? Would it be video first? Would it be socially injected? During my time at Meta, I really saw video as the new medium that was really sort of rapidly disrupting that traditional model. And the sort of linchpin for launching the product was really during the pandemic. I mean, there was, restaurants were obviously struggling everywhere, and indoor, outdoor dining and masks and everything else that was just changing day over day. And the thought was to be able to get some folks in San Francisco at the time to be able to band together and say, if we can just, take some 10-second videos, this place is open, come on down, come support them, these courageous businesses that were staying open during really tough times, that would be a great mission to garner folks around. And it turned out to be a mission that we were able to rally just a lot of great people and a lot of noteworthy creators around. And the product is now, live and scaling in 150 countries and 10,000 cities. But we're incredibly proud of that legacy of supporting local businesses really being the cornerstone of our DNA.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I know part of, I'm sure, what drove a lot of that scale and growth has been how engaging it is when you're in the app and scrolling, and that positive feeling of the reviews that you see. And I know for me, getting sort of the recommendations or what feels like a really personalized experience has made it really engaging for me. Would love to hear from you on how do you use recommendations and personalization in the app to build that loyalty with your user base?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously key to the product experience. I think there's a couple of things. One, simply the inherent nature of video, right? It's first person, and that alone, coming from the review landscape, just completely changes the sort of nature of the review, right? Because you're able to sort of see firsthand. I think the social injection is another big component, right? So when we traditionally think about reviews, anonymity is sort of the key factor there, right? We don't know who this person is. We really don't know what else they like, and we don't know if they're, more importantly, like us, right? Which is obviously a huge proof point in terms of how much weight that recommendation would sort of naturally bear for you. The third piece is being able to layer the social graph that you're injecting on top of the content, right? Showcasing where your friends have been, where they're going in the future, right? Where they're bookmarking, where they're recommending. And so those different tools enable us to create a set of personalization that's really unique to Atmosfy. So not only is it hyperlocal, not only, do algorithms understand, tastes and preferences, and the product continue to evolve with you, but then you're actually able to take that social graph and start thinking about prioritizing content based on where your friends have been or their friends' friends have been, right, to create an experience that is just more likely to serve you recommendations that you're likely to enjoy.
Yeah, totally. And I see that even with the hyperlocal element and the recommendations, you really have the feeling of you're getting a restaurant recommendation from your neighbor or somebody in your community. So it's cool to see that come to life. And part of that also, I think, is the location element and injecting that real world data into the app to enhance the experience. And I think that's in part where the Foursquare and Atmosfy partnership really begins or takes shape. So I'd love to hear from you on how has that helped enhance the digital experience? You talked a lot about the recommendations and the social graph, but what about bringing in the real world location element to the app? How has that helped as you think about user experience and enhancing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you point out, it's sort of the cornerstone of the Atmosfy Foursquare partnership. And I think when we were looking for a partner in this, we were thinking about, what rich contextual data can we layer into the product, right, to be able to increase, at the end of the day, the trust in the user recommendation in the video, to increase the likelihood that you're willing to go and see a video and actually walk into a place and support a local business. And so the data that Foursquare provided, sort of at the thematic metadata level for the POI, was incredibly valuable and remains that way. And also the hyper-local sort of geolocation element, right, that enables us to be able to say, these are places that are trending around you, right? And these are places that are, within 300 feet of you, and then have top recommendations from your friends, right? Or, these are places that you can be the first to post at, right? And so all of that is sort of made possible through the Foursquare technology that allows us to take incredibly granular hyper-local data, layer that on top of what's organically happening in your city through videos coming in, and be able to build some real magic to be able to scan your city and give you real-time updates for what's happening in an incredible hyper-local capacity. And so that's been a great, tremendous part of the product that continues to be, one of the things that the user base is most excited about.
Yeah, that's great. It's something we hear across a lot of the apps that we're working with, is just the importance not only of the rich context that you mentioned, also just getting the accuracy right at scale, and especially as you get into like hyper local communities, how important that can be to driving a good experience. So it's fun to hear you talk about it in the context of Atmosfy and how that's fit in. I am sure building Atmosfy was not a walk in the park and not super easy. So would love to open it up to you on kind of what you learned along the way. What were some of the big inflection points for you in building Atmosfy, and then not just building it, but then scaling it in the way that you have? And kind of based on that, this is a meaty question, but then what are the tips you have for others who are maybe interested in going down a similar path?
Yeah, a lot there to unpack, certainly more than probably we have time for. I think, highlights it starts with an idea, right? And it starts with an idea that you're passionate about, and then it's building an MVP, and it's building a V1, and it's building a V2, and it's iterating. And I think, some of the bigger challenges are in some ways the less obvious ones, right? And so it's like there's the tech and there's the getting it in people's hands, but what is the experience that leads to an online experience becoming an offline experience in a real person, right? What's the right user journey to be able to establish trust, right? What are the right trust mechanisms to be able to see content, be inspired, and say, now I'll go, walk in the door and support that local business? And so I think the advice I would get is to, stay passionate about your ideas, absolutely pursue them. It's a ton of headwinds, right? As any entrepreneur knows, and that never goes away. But continue to stay focused on the mission. It's like unfallible faith in the destination, but flexibility on the journey, right? Just to be able to leave room for the inevitable sort of changes that take place. I think anybody that's looking to be able to build, a video or creator-based product, I would encourage you to think about where your creators are, right? There's never been higher creator engagement. An incredible high proportion of Gen Z wants to be creators going in the future. And so thinking about who are going to be my early adopters, who are going to be my creators that you absolutely have to have day one to start powering the platform, right? And how am I going to reach out to them? And how do I create a product that gives value to them? Obviously, in the early days, monetization for them is tough, right? So it's more like, how do I create a platform that solves a need that they have, right? And how can I give them value? So hopefully those are some kind of like tangible takeaways in terms of the journey and what I've learned along the way.
Yeah, that's really great. Do you think there's anything in there, and it sounds like it's probably all of them, that really contributed to the success of Atmosfy so far, of like something you think you just nailed and did it right that has been driving a lot of your growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think starting with the mission, honestly, was absolutely critical for us. It was a counterintuitive time to launch a dining and nightlife app during the pandemic, right? For obvious reasons. But at the same time, that inspired so many creators to say, a video is kind of like a tip, right? Can we give back to the restaurant? Can we say, I had a good experience, let's put them on the map, right? Let's get some folks down here to support them. And I think that mission, and staying true to that mission and everything that we do, thinking about that's the lens for success, right? The lens for success of the product is, are we motivating people to go and have an offline experience at these places? And that's the litmus test for everything that we do. And so I think starting with that mission not only enabled us to rally some folks early on, but also gives us a guiding principle for what the success of this product looks like, because there's a lot of different ways to evaluate it, right? But staying true to that has given us sort of a true north.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love the concept of how you bridge the digital and physical worlds together, and how that all plays out and creates this really cool virtuous cycle for the creators and the restaurants and nightlife folks as well. So appreciate all those tips. And I think that gets through the main points that we had lined up to discuss. So appreciate, Michael, you sharing all of that feedback and your sort of insight into how to best build these types of experiences and so on. And so with that, I think we'll bring Danielle and the Adweek team back in to help facilitate some Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you all both so much for those insights. I feel like there's so much to discuss and unpack from what you shared today. I love everything you had to say, Michael, about, having flexibility on the journey while still having that unshakable faith. And you mentioned of the virtuous cycle here too, Barry. I think that's super apt, and increasingly we're going to see that these ventures that are getting this kind of interest, like Michael's, like Atmosfy has, are going to be driven that way. So lots to unpack and talk about. We do have time to get to a few questions here. We're going to get to as many as we can. We've got plenty of time, so we'll go through what we've got. So please feel free to put your questions using the Q&A tool beneath the video window on your screen. If there are some questions we don't get to today, please know that we always make sure they get forwarded over to our speakers so they have the opportunity to possibly reply offline. A couple of other quick reminders from Adweek before we get started with Q&A. Today's webinar has been recorded, and we're going to send you a link to that on-demand recording. So keep an eye out for it. We'll send that around 3:30 Eastern. Feel free to share it. And also, if you'd like a copy of today's slides that have framed the discussion, you can grab those, grab a PDF from the event resources area right beneath the video window on your screen as well. All right, let's get started, dive into some of these questions here. So question for Atmosfy here, Michael. Obviously, it's so core to what you're doing is this enthusiasm for local business and supporting local businesses, knowing just how difficult it can be, right, depending on the market, to get things up and running. Post-pandemic, the market has changed so much. So the question is, how will Atmosfy continue to partner and support local businesses? What's on the roadmap?
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously core and sort of central to everything we do. I think a lot has changed, and so as the restrictions have continued to lift, we've thought long and hard about what functionality can we establish within the product for local businesses that solves problems for them, right? And we know content is one of the challenges for local businesses, right? They're not in the, the video game, or they're not in the viral game, or they don't really understand, how to get out there and be able to influence as a creator, right? And so enabling local businesses to partner with creators, right? And thinking about how can they leverage the existing content that's coming in and being able, to promote that within the product, right? To increase visibility for their restaurant. How are we able to take the great targeting capability that we have at a hyper-local level, at a personalized level, at a friend graph level, and be able to serve those recommendations and match people with local businesses? What kind of tools can we give them to interface with their customers? There's obviously sort of the notion of customer retention as we have at the actual, business level, right? As we have people coming in and uploading multiple, video reviews from the same, point of interest, over the course of 3 or 4 months. And so, the ability to take that data and give tools to the businesses to take advantage of the content, to interface with the creators, and to take that data and be able to really generate some meaningful, actionable data that helps them understand their customer graph and helps them optimize accordingly, are all on the roadmap in short order.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like there's just sort of no limit to the ways that this can be utilized for local businesses. And I really appreciate your point about, creators posting from the same spot multiple times in the space of a month. I'm not a creator myself, but I live in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and there is an embarrassment of riches of places new and established at all time at which to eat. But yet I still kind of find myself at the burrito bar, the cool speakeasy, and the best pizza place every other night. So definitely can see all of that coming into play. We have another question here for you, Michael, from the Atmosfy perspective. Obviously, you've just laid out a bit of your roadmap with regards to how you want to continue to support local businesses and really just stay true to that mission. But what's next for Atmosfy? How do you plan to grow and expand in the months and years to come? Give us that vision.
Yeah, I mean, I think, personalization remains, something that you're almost never done doing. And we're continuing to think about all of the great ways that we can personalize the content, that we can match creators, that we can match, people with similar interests on the product, right, to create and continue to expand a real core community, right? A core community that going on the product enables you to not only discover experiences, but to be able to discover creators, but, discover people with similar interests on the product, right? And have all of that sort of factor into the likelihood of, in real life events happening, right? So continuing to drive personalization on the product is absolutely key. Continuing to build a lot of tools and functionality for creators, right? We're super proud of our, of the amount of folks that are posting to the product and continue to inspire other folks to post to the product. And so giving them tools that really make, their journey effortless is obviously on the list. And then of course, everything that's happening with AI has given us a tremendous unlock capability to be able to do some things that just a few years ago really weren't possible. And so those are three kind of broad tenets that we're continuing to drive within the app that we feel will be really critical to our success.
Absolutely. So we have a question here. How are you creating awareness for Atmosfy within the restaurant industry? Thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the biggest ways we've seen it, we see it happen today, and we've kind of continued to see it is the organic word of mouth that happens as people that, you talk about being a regular at 2 or 3 places, right? And suddenly people are taking videos of their favorite places and they're talking with the staff and they're talking about, that this restaurant has a profile and maybe the business didn't even know they had a profile, right? And so we see there's a natural synergy and relationship between people that love the places that they're at and the creators, right, that are posting to those places, and they often sort of organically loop those businesses in. We obviously have a bunch of other sort of outreach campaigns and a lot of other things that that we do to be able to drive awareness of the product. But I think the main driver has always been and continues to be the creators that are organically at these places, being passionate about the product and being passionate about the place and wanting to be able to link those two in real life.
It makes perfect sense. And switching gears slightly here to the notion of the impact on sales lift, on revenue for these restaurants. As we talked about earlier, it's a very competitive market, especially in cities like New York, like San Francisco, where there's just a wealth of options. For video reviews in particular, can you walk the audience through how you've anecdotally seen it impact sales lift? Do you have perhaps a little mini case study you can share with us? Just thoughts on how you're seeing that?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think, one thing that's almost critical to have an appreciation for is sort of the current landscape, right? So, we obviously work with thousands and thousands of businesses and hundreds of conversations, and you realize what their world looks like even within current social media today, right? Is trying to go out and find a creator and, paying that creator hundreds of dollars and a free meal and being able to say, okay, go, post something on Instagram. And then you ask them, so how did that go? And they're like, I don't know. We got 67 likes. That's all I know. And that is the current landscape. So they're trying to access content. They, folks are aware that video is the future. That's not a secret. But how to be able to capture the content and be able to reach people in a hyper local context with geo intent to purchase is an entirely another matter. And so one of the things that, the product itself is geolocated, right? New York has a feed, LA has a feed, SF has a feed. And so we are able to reach the right people in the right area that are actively deciding where to eat and drink, right? And then we're able to take that data and be able to just provide a ton more attribution in terms of how much social engagement it got, how many people are likely to visit based upon what they saw. And we're able to actually give attribution to the business about the success and the likelihood, the prediction of that on incremental revenue. And then, of course, leveraging great Foursquare technology, right? Be able to understand, fundamental foot traffic as a result. So coming from a world of simply, likes and comments, right? And that's the only proxy for how that might affect revenue, to a geolocated product that has geo intent to purchase, that we can use the data that we have to not only forecast incremental revenue, but also be able to provide an estimate of actual incremental revenue on the other side.
Incredible. I mean, the granularity is just night and day there, right? Between what you described and what, a lot of business owners and creators are in the woods with in terms of, using certain social platforms and not necessarily getting what they need out of it in terms of being able to see the IRI. So thank you very much for walking us through that. I think that's super helpful for our audience. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions today. I would like to thank our speakers, Michael and Barry, for joining us. Just a couple of quick reminders again from Adweek. Today's webinar has been recorded, so we'll send out that recording later today, and make sure you download those slides from the event resources area. So as always, if you enjoyed today's webinar, be sure to check out our upcoming events to learn more about them at adweek.com/webinars. You can see everything we have coming up. Again, huge thank you to our speakers for joining us today for a great conversation and for letting us pick your brains during this Q&A session. Thank you to our audience for joining us live today. And as always, we look forward to seeing everyone on an upcoming Adweek webinar. Thanks all.
Thanks very much.